In my recent CFAR workshop, I had a real issue with double crux. Something felt wrong about it, and I couldn't quite pinpoint what that was. And then on my last day of my CFAR workshop, someone brought up Robert Keegan's 5 levels of development, and it clicked for me what felt so wrong about double crux. So I'd like to try and impart that right now and look at what a new version of double crux might look like, taking into account Keegan's stages of development. So briefly, Keegan's stages of development are social maturity, and he also calls them levels of consciousness, I believe. And I'm just going to talk about levels 4 and 5 in this video. So level 4 is essentially where you see social structures, and you see institutional structures, and you see belief structures, and you're able to use that to have a gears level understanding of the world and how things work. And you can relate with other people in ways where you try and sort of figure out which structure is right, and you sort of take the parts of the structure that are good for you, and that's great. And then level 5 is sort of where you see you sort of see that each institutional structure has its own merits and values, and that the truth is somewhere outside of the structures in your head and in reality. And so you're able to hold two structures up at once and play with them and see the truth in both of them. So internal double crux, if I were to create a visual metaphor for what it is, let's say your belief was a rabbit, and that rabbit was floating in the space, and you are able to sort of zoom in and around this rabbit with another person, and each of you throws up a structure onto that rabbit, and it's got levers and gears and pulleys and things going on inside the structure. And then you two can sort of zoom around, and you're sort of trying to find a place, and you're looking around these two structures, these two projected structures onto the rabbit, and then you wait a second. There is a spot where my structure outputs fluffy and your structure outputs rough. Let's go try and touch that area and see whether it's fluffy or rough, and then we will have figured out which structure is correct. And this is a very Keegan's level 4 level of thinking about our relationships with other people, sort of looking at which structure is correct, and then the person who was wrong is able to correct their structure. Now, I consider myself sort of trying to transition to level 5, and I've gotten the ability, I think, to hold two structures in my mind and see the ability. And what I'm really working on is bringing this to a social level and figuring out how to interact with people in a way where we can both sort of throw structures up and play with them. And so I'm going to sketch out for you what double crux might start to look like in this level 5 mode of thinking. So what the level 5 version of double crux might look like is you and I both throw up structures that we know are wrong. And we start looking at them and say, hey, let's poke these and look around at these and figure out how they might break. And then, oh cool, so it breaks here. What if like I chopped off part of my structure and like put it onto part of your structure? And what would happen then? And okay, let me throw this other structure on that I've been thinking about that has some other truths to it. And let's project these like 4 other structures at once, and then like turn one inside out and put them all together, and there's this new structure. And what if we use that structure of trying to actually feel it and see if it's fluffy or rough? But we should also keep in mind this other structure that only works for things that are easy to touch. And there might be important things in the structures that you can't touch or are not easy to touch. And so at the end of this, you start to get an inkling of a new structure that is also false, because this is a model, and models are useful but false. But it has the features of the different structures you've just thrown up. And you might not have the full structure, you might just have an inkling of it, but you somehow have gotten closer to the truth of what that bunny is and how it fits in with the other animals. But you haven't figured out who's right and who's wrong. And you haven't figured out the truth. You've gotten a better model that will also break when you work with it. And so that's what sort of bothered me about double crux, and I'd really like to see if there are people developing a technique that looks more like the second thing that I've talked about. Thanks, guys.